Okay, wow, good morning. How's your breakfast?
Great.
Thank you. Very good, very good, very good.
Thank you. Excellent food.
Yeah. No, Ambassador said this is the first time that we have the hotel owner to serve us. Really appreciate. Okay, I think this is our tradition. Every time we have a keynote speaker over the Bay Area, we invite him to have a breakfast to the close friends in the Bay Area. So very good this morning that all attending. So while we start, how about we start from the Consul General and then rotate this way. Everyone say whatever you want to communicate with the ambassador, and if you had a really good question, and he will ask, he will answer whatever you said. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to just say a few words to earn my breakfast. First, welcome to San Francisco, and thank you for coming again. I know you have been doing such a great job in promoting relations between Taiwan and the U.S. And I do like to mention one thing to you, which is a vaccine. Because 2 months ago, only 1% of the population in Taiwan are vaccinated. And until yesterday, it's about only a little bit more than 20% of the population in Taiwan are vaccinated, at least one dose of vaccines. So I wonder if the U.S. government will be able to provide more. I know it's very difficult, but considering the relationship between Taiwan and the U.S., we do hope that you can take it into a serious consideration. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, that's a big question. Is we made these commitments to provide large numbers. The initial commitment for 80 million, and then over that the 500 million shots under COVAX. And so it will be interesting to see how that gets divided up. COVAX itself is intended for lower income countries, but we do have some say over how it gets distributed. So I don't have anything to report on that. I will say that we are in regular talks, and of course there is a talk between pharmaceutical companies and their Taiwanese counterparts about is it possible to produce U.S. origin vaccines in Taiwan. And meanwhile, more controversially, I know that a couple of Taiwanese companies are getting ready to begin producing their own.
Yeah.
So it's my hope is to get out to Taiwan sometime this calendar year.
Yeah.
And I hope that by the end of this calendar year, the conditions will allow me to go there without quarantine.
Yeah.
So keep your fingers crossed. We are, like I said, we continue to discuss it, and I hope we'll see more deliveries from you.
Yeah, I just want to convey this message to you because I was with Ambassador Xiao 2 days ago, and she was also very anxious about getting more vaccines.
Right.
I saw her got some gray hairs already. No, kidding. Okay, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
And I had black hair before the pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Okay,
Yeah.
next one. Yeah, everyone introduce yourself first, and then Ambassador would like to pick up whatever you have.
Yeah, I'm Alan Lee, the new president of the Taiwanese covers the San Francisco and Bay Area.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to listen last night your speech, and great to meet you again here. Yeah, thank you for first. You have done a lot of good job to help United States and Taiwan relationship. I appreciate. I think that all our board members they highly appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you very much. Hope you can keep to help us. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Oh,
you.
Alan, what you're doing, your job? More interesting to know that.
I think for us, for my
Your personal, yeah.
Your profession.
yeah, my profession
Yeah.
is in the computer side hardware. We are doing the hardware manufacture, design, and wholesale distribution in United States. I'm in charge of the U.S. subsidiary. Yeah, I think our product is in the kind of applications from the internet firewall, POS, medical device manufacturer, and also I think the energy side. I think we do have the lots of the application and successful story and case study in the industry.
What is the name of the company? This is a Taiwan-based company?
Yes, Taiwan, our headquarters called Power Inc.
Polar Inc.
Yeah, our mother company is called Posy Flex.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, do the POS. Yeah.
Sounds very fascinating. Something like I could never understand.
Yeah. It's
that's
the
really,
we use the like the cashier use the
Yeah.
For the transaction in the restaurant, in the hotel.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, congratulations. You know, I guess should it be congratulations or best wishes? But anyhow, I'm happy you were able to come, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the future too.
Yes.
And I think you're on the cutting edge of some of the great possibilities in the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. And as we look at building resilient, secure supply chains, the sorts of work that you do are going to be more and more important.
Good morning, Ambassador. I'm Roy Yan. I'm the Director of Culture Center of TACO in San Francisco. Actually, there are two culture centers in the great San Francisco area. The other one is in the San Francisco city. And our center is, the mission of our center is to provide a wide variety of services to the Taiwanese American community. We also work with them to do the cultural exchange to the American people and do some community services and some charity work. For example, we work with them to get lots of PPE from Taiwan and donate to the community. And that's my job. I have a very easy question for you. Since last night you say the beef noodle soup is your favorite Taiwan food, and one of my important job is to introduce Taiwan to the young generation, second generation or third generation of Taiwanese American, because they don't know much about Taiwan. My question is, what's your second and third favorite of Taiwanese? Because we have a Taiwan night market each year in our center. We want to draw more young Taiwanese here.
No, I'm going to go very cautiously here because I don't want to offend anybody or anything. That's a tough question. I mean, no, I'm not going to choose favorites because after Numero Bientang, there's a lot of good, and there's nothing that stands out enough so I'm going to say this is better than this. I don't want to offend this. You know what I mean? I think the Taiwan food aspect is huge, and I'm going to ask you: do you work at all with the State Department? Because there is a lot more interest and more funding coming into exchanges. Work with ECA. ECA is the Bureau of something in Educational and Cultural Affairs.
Okay.
And I had a meeting with them on Friday, and they're eager to find projects where the U.S. and Taiwan can work together. And in general, I think it's a good thing for the TICO offices locally to figure out what they can do in Tecro in Washington, to be in close touch, to sort of say, okay, where do we build the cultural understanding, the people-to-people contacts. One thing that I think is always very successful, and we do in Honolulu, for example, is the Taiwan Film Festivals. You produce some great movies nowadays, and it's something that's pretty accessible and people tend to like. In fact, I think I was at the with President Tsai at the Cultural Center in San Francisco City.
70, right? When she just swore in the next year, early next year, she was here.
Exactly.
She told me that.
Exactly.
他来那个蔡英文来的时候，他去过你们 center， 刚 open 的时候。
Yeah, and at that point, I think they were on the verge of or just opening one of the annual film shows. Those are a big deal, and it spreads well. And who would have thought something like bubble tea would take off? So you're in a very important field, and again, I think it's pretty open. There's a lot of interest now. Just people are saying Taiwan. People are hearing pretty good things about Taiwan, and the more you can reinforce that with the people-to-people contacts, whether it's New Mian or my second or third favorite, through the movies, through just getting people to know the culture and the individuals, of course, too. One of the big things that people are pushing right now is exchange of students. I think both sides would like to see a big increase in the number of students under various programs and teachers. I mentioned it in the speech last night, but this bilingual Taiwan by 2030, very ambitious goal. But we want to help. Meanwhile, we're looking at the Confucius Institutes pulling back quite a bit, and many of them getting shut down. And there's still a demand for Mandarin language, so it's how we work that out together. I think is very important. And of course, you've got facilities. I mentioned that maybe I didn't to you, but after a long dry spell, I've started taking Chinese language lessons again, and doing it through the recommendation of the local cultural center in Honolulu. The TICO chief, Michael Tsung, gave him a call, and they recommended a lady who's a great teacher and very satisfied with it. But you've got the facilities in some of these places, and more outreach and sort of getting in touch with universities and saying, okay, here's what we're doing, attracting more young Taiwanese to come out for a year, 2 years, 3 years in the States to teach. I think that's a win-win situation for both the U.S. and Taiwan.
I forgot to mention about in September there were 2 Mandarin Learning Center opened in the South Bay. We work together with the Chinese school. They will have 2 Mandarin Learning Center.
That's great.
You should change to a Taiwanese school. Chinese schools. But on the Confucius Institute issue, is it possible to come up with a national policy to enforce certain rules so that they don't use the institute for certain purposes, political purposes?
Well, what we're doing, I think, is largely it's almost like naming and shaming, and you can pick out some of them. It's actually the big question is control of curriculum and control of teaching methods. Right. And unfortunately, the way it has been managed, and I think that we're starting to get tougher on this, was basically that the Chinese government would come up with candidates and we would have to pick among the candidates. And that's always a bad way to run a cultural exchange program, or in this case, picking teachers for language programs. And so they're looking at convincing smaller schools that have no control over what's being taught that they better be careful And you're looking at most of those beginning to close down. The larger universities are more arrogant, and actually they also have more ability to monitor what's being taught. So those are the ones that are reluctant. We are, as far as I know, we haven't come to the point of banning them, but their numbers are going down, pretty sharply. I think they're down a third to a half from over 3 or 4 years ago, because a lot of them were giving a curriculum that's twisted. We were talking about Google last night, the fact that when you're even using Fontaine, so you type things in and all of a sudden you see stuff obviously geared towards the mainland coming in. Well, it's a new world out there, and we're all trying to figure it out, and trying to figure out, particularly as I said yesterday, with the dawning recognition that in most areas, China is at best a competitor, and we have to figure out how, in the areas where our values and interests confront, how to make sure that China does not impose its values and interests. And so, I actually, again, to be totally honest, the last time I took Chinese lessons was about almost a decade previously, just after I moved back to Honolulu. My son and I were taking lessons from a 22 or 23-year-old Confucius Institute teacher. And she didn't do anything. It was just 2-on-1, my son and me and her. She didn't do anything political with us, but she actually provided interesting insights into what a 22-year-old urban dweller from, I forget what city she was from, but from an urbanite was thinking of and looking at.
Yeah, but I heard that in some other, maybe European country or somewhere, that the Chinese is sort of buying out of young people, so that the young people could become a YouTuber to spread whatever ideologies around the country, around the world.
I don't think that's nearly as big a threat as the troll farms in China. That's, and yeah, you might have a few, but you also have a lot of, what do they call them, captive senators. So I want to be sure that the stuff you hear, there are some academics, young people, whatever, who are willing to push that line, but frequently that line is being pushed by somebody who looks like a young academic or young university students from Beijing via Singapore through an account that looks like it's coming out of pick a country, France or Italy or whatever. So yeah, I'm sure there was some of that, and that's hard to cut out completely. But the feelings in Europe have turned so sharply against China so quickly, and in a way, in some of the areas that the young people care most about. They are. I think Xinjiang gets much more attention by the people of Europe than by the governments of Europe, and one thing that unites almost all young people, of course, is climate change, and the Chinese keeping on deferring things and continuing to build coal plants while saying we're just a developing country and we'll continue to increase our emissions up until, pick a date, 2030, 2040, 2050. Doesn't go down that well. And so, I concentrate on the democracy aspects, but in many places these things are just as scary. So you look at the popular opinion about China in Europe, also in much of Asia, it has plummeted. And Xi Jinping is now by far the most mistrusted leader in the world.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm not denying it's a problem. I think a lot of it, like I said, the bigger problem is really the rerouting and capturing of accounts and making up false persons and non-existent persons.
Okay. Anyway, my name is Joe Chen, and I'm a retired professor at Cal State University, teaching in financial area, but economics by training. I have a PhD in economics, so naturally, I'm very interested in not only economic policies but also political policies. So a few questions.
Okay.
As a professor, I always have too many questions. Okay, so on the economic side, what is the status now on the TIFA negotiation, and could that lead to sign of FTA, free trade agreement? That's one thing. So and if it would take time, then what are the major concerns from the U.S.? Okay, and second question related to formalize the relationship with Taiwan politically. What are the concerns? What are the risks? Probability that this can be done.
Okay. Actually, the first one I spent a lot of time on in this visit. I did visits with Commerce, USTR, and with respect to the TIFA process, that's ongoing. Like they'll have ag talks, I think, on September 15th. And they've set up a bunch of working groups to discuss the individual issues that we both agreed to in the TIFA. And that's exactly what the TIFA talks are supposed to be. It's supposed to be a framework within which you try to reach agreement on areas of interest to both sides.
Yeah.
Okay, so that I was very encouraged with. Everybody seems enthusiastic about it, and the plans seem to be going forward. Now, the question about a BTA, I will be honest with you, things are pretty held up. I think you, as a former professor who's obviously well read, are looking at this talk about a worker-centered trade policy.
Mm-hmm.
And a worker-centered labor policy. We're actually starting talks on that, what it might look like with Taiwan. But the question of more broadly of a worker-centered trade policy, nobody knows exactly what it means, and the bureaucracy is trying to figure out what the political masters want back in Washington. And I've been telling people that right now we're not doing anything on bilateral trade agreements. There are none in progress. There were several in progress under the previous administration. So, I didn't come away with hopes that you're going to see a quick resolution leading to a bilateral trade agreement with Taiwan or anybody else, because it's a very complicated issue. There are a lot of people pushing, saying, hey, once we figure this out, Taiwan should be fairly high up on the list. But, there's going to be a lot of other places. So did I answer both your questions?
Yes.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but related to this one is there any intention for the U.S. to go back to the TPP, and also to a certain extent, help Taiwan to get into TPP?
That's hard to say. Genuinely, I'm not trying to be evasive here, because the President Biden did leave himself room, but of course, if you haven't figured out what a worker-centered trade policy looks like yet, then you're not going to be able to go back into the TPP, because your opponents will say that's not worker-centered. Some of the most interesting areas are ones where I just scratch my head and say, how are you going to figure that out? So, for example, the digital services, it's a huge issue. Everybody wants to sign agreements with it. We're negotiating with the Japanese. And then you come down to, and how do you fit that into a worker-centered trade policy? Again, on that one, I don't know when. I don't rule out the possibility that the administration might find a way to restart talks on TPP, and of course it would only be after we became members that we would try to influence.
Okay, so would it be easier, to negotiate for sort of piecemeal ETA, such as a digital? That's exactly what
I would say USTR, if you're looking at the big plan, that's what it is to take these individual issues and see how far we can go on them. Yeah, that's exactly what.
My name is Martin Ho, Deputy Director in TICO in San Francisco. I just was to San Francisco 2 weeks. My background is technology. I majored in material science and I was working in TSMC in Taiwan for 7 years. And now I changed my job to Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's very, for me, it's very lucky and can have a different views of the in the technology and in the political. And I'm very happy to be here because in here I want to use my previous experience to assist my Director General to strengthen the local government and parliament members' link to Taiwan, and also to deepen the cooperation and between the technology. In Silicon Valley, there are so many high-tech companies and Taiwanese engineers, business leaders here. So I'm so happy. I hope I can contribute myself and to do my job very well.
Oh, what a smart assignment. I mean, in terms of, the authority to say, okay, here's a young man. Morris John might complain about brain drain, but basically, well, welcome. I went to the opening of the Silicon Valley, whatever it is, the Taiwan office in Silicon Valley. Is that still going? Is that?
Which one?
亚洲西部亚洲
Office is here. The main office is in the United States here. Santa Clara, Sunnyvale.
Yeah.
Silicon Valley.
It was all about trying to bring the high-tech talent of two together. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What did you do for TSMC?
I'm a design for the engineer.
Oh, okay.
At that time, there was only just proceed to 90 nanometer. Now it goes down to 2 or 3 nanometer.
Wow. Pleasure to meet you, sir.
That's how they dominate. There's that process. No one learned how to team up with the TSM. The one example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ambassador, my name is Yao. Nice to meet over here with you again. So I still remember 2019, right, March. So you were here chatting with us. Right? So welcome. So I'm the Senior Director of Engineering for Applied Materials. Right? So equipment company. Yeah.
I've seen their office, their whatever you call it, their plant. In Taiwan.
Exactly. Yeah. So my background is I have 2 associations. One is North American Taiwanese Engineering and Science Association. Previous president, we have a current president over here, Rex over here, Chen. So another one is I'm the advisor for industrial advisor for the chamber for this conference. Yeah. So again, thank you for being here. I have one quick question for you. Right now we're talking about semi, right? So semiconductor. So we have TSMC doing really well. As a matter of fact, I have a lot of friends over here we're chatting. So they say all of a sudden they are #1 on the world, right? So and then they used to be the first choice of partner, right? So on the board for all the countries and especially for Intel, right? So global foundry. Now all of a sudden they are the #1. So they are also internally struggle. What is their position, right? So among the global. Now coming back, so I think that Intel also started to trying to be head-to-head and catch up, right? So the question is in the U.S. government's point of view, right? So how do you see in the future, next 3-5 years, how does these 2 big companies, right? So work together and still be in good synergy, right? So helping each other to for the better future. Yeah, thank you.
I will have to admit I'm not a good one to comment on it because I won't have much more knowledge than you. I mean, I see Intel sort of implying that they're going to get back into direct fabrication themselves.
Exactly.
And that's I think that's partly to to ensure the flow of funds. You know, it's my guess that basically, you know, there is this move to do, I forget the name of the legislation, but basically to provide subsidies in the high-tech areas in particular. And so there will be money around, and I think for Intel, they want to grab part of that and sort of use that to re-energize something that they had gotten out of. Because there will be a lot of attraction to trying to produce inside the US. And of course, you know, you've got TSMC down in Arizona thinking the same thing. So if Intel really is serious and begins trying to get back into fabrication in a big way, they will take advantage of some of that federal money. And the question is, and I haven't seen the legislation, but I assume that the money would be available for, you know, foreign companies that want to invest that have adequate protections and good, strong agreements with the U.S. for investment in the U.S. Because I do think the thrust of the legislation will be to try and get production to the extent possible back. And of course, that raises all sorts of questions because everybody in the world is looking at it. The Europeans are going after it big time too. So, you know, and the question is, can you actually end up with cooperation in these areas? And there are some folks, you know, I think the Europeans have a research and development center at a university in Belgium or something like that. And they're interested in working with any benign partners. They had actually gotten into agreements with Huawei that they're now eagerly trying to get out of. And so I think you're going to see a lot of churn. You'll probably end up with excess capacity in the market economies in addition to huge excess capacity in mainland China of relatively unsophisticated chips. So it's a very interesting time. I don't have a prediction. I do think that the intent is to get more production back in the States and to, obviously even more important,